Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Big O Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Ortiz, and today I am joined by what I want to call a close friend. Prior to this podcast starting off, there was this major revelation of similar interest in sports teams, but I am joined by the founder of Hoops Canada, Mr. Jay Holness. Jay, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm just happy to be a part of the show. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Listen, I was actually talking to Chosette, Miss J, about trying to have her come on a few months ago because I really wanted to change the dynamic. I had a lot of male guests at the time, and our schedules just didn't sort of link up. But then, she reached out to me maybe about a week or 2 weeks ago and said, listen, I can't do it, but let me get the hubby on here because he'll talk sports with you. And little did I know that it would spawn this great sort of conversation that we've been able to go sort of back and forth with. And I'm really excited. I'm not going to lie. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. There's definitely a lot of things that I'd like to bounce off of you and get your opinion on, just because of your background, your schooling, your experience in coaching. We worked for the similar employer at one point. So, I mean, a little bit of a different generation, which is kind of nice because it's a little bit different now. But I definitely think that, there's a lot to unpack here. And I just want to sort of like get right into it.
Same thing. Those are my favorite words. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I like to hear. So one thing that I did, in doing a little bit of research on you, Hoops Canada was the first thing that sort of popped out at me. And the first time it sort of came out to me was when you actually did an Instagram live video with Chosette, which I think was talking about like the balance of relationships. And
Correct.
Hearing the perspectives of both you and Miss J, they're very similar. I mean, she has 17 different things going on. You have like 18 different things go on. I mean, trying to connect with you, you're like, listen, I can't do these 2 days. I'm finishing up renovating a house. I got dry land training. I've got, all of these things going on. And at the same time, you have this great, healthy relationship with your wife and you have young kids. How do you balance what I call a juggling act with all the things that you do?
Both doing the same thing. So it's not hard to coordinate. So, it's easy for me to pass the ball to her and she runs with it and for a slam dunk and she throws me the alley-oop or I play defense. So we can bounce off each other very, very well. So it's created a great dynamic. Our kids are used to it and our kids are developed the same thing. So my older son is going to be 16
Wow.
in January and the young one is going to be 13. So we're having preteens. So they've been able to be around it all their lives. So it's easy for them to say, okay, dad is away for 2 weeks or dad's away for a month. Mom's going to take us. Mom's away for 2 weeks. Dad's going to take us. All right. So they've gotten really, really used to us just having this balance between each other and know that we're going to be busy at all times.
Now, it's an interesting analogy. I mean, obviously with Hoops Canada, there's a little bit of a basketball background there. But if I had to ask you that, you made the reference, assist, alley-oop, dunk, playmaking. If you had to describe you and Miss J as a power duo in the NBA, now it could be current day, could be back in the day, what would be the best duo to describe the relationship and coordination that you guys have together?
Man, you know what? I'm not a LeBron fan, but I think
That's blasphemous for our team, man. What are you talking about?
I know. It's a tough one. I'm a Laker fan, but not a LeBron fan. People are confused when I say that. But it would have been LeBron and D Wade.
Okay.
I was a huge D Wade fan before he teamed up with LeBron.
Right.
Like I loved watching Shaq and D Wade win that championship in Miami. But to see LeBron and D Wade go at it, I became a fan of that duo.
Right.
Because they were both, animals who can go get it. And they knew when to take the reins and when to hold back. So LeBron knew when to let D-Wade go after it. D-Wade knew when to let LeBron go after it. And they would both come back and try to guard the best players on the other team. So they were both two-way players in that era in my book, because they had to play defense on the
For sure.
Because otherwise both of them couldn't be on the floor.
Well, that's true. And I mean, Pat Riley had that expectation of them too, putting them together, right? I mean, him, Chris Bosh, I mean, those three players came from the same draft. And looking at that draft year, it's just incredible, right? It's they accomplished a lot, and sure they got a lot of flack for sort of teaming up, but bringing this back to a relationship,
Mhm.
you need to find yourself a good partner in order to have success,
100%.
right? I mean, like you need to surround yourself and be around people who have the same agenda, who want the same things. And it's very similar to, like we said, like a relationship. And that's the thing when you have so many things going on in different aspects and in the same universe, there needs to be balance, right? Like you said, you pick up when mom's away, when you're away, mom picks up things. The kids just sort of know what's going on. And speaking of, you being away, now we're going to get into a little bit of like your credentials a little bit. You started Hoops Canada. You also were an assistant coach at Ryerson. Is that correct?
Correct. That's 100%.
So you're working with Ryerson, which means at that time you're probably going to play other teams inside of Ontario and
Area.
probably Canada. Um,
Exactly.
you were also an assistant coach for the Edmonton Stingers.
Correct with the CEBL.
Now,
Just recently, this summer series for the summer series.
so what is the CEBL?
So the CEBL is the Canadian Elite Basketball League.
Okay.
It started. Was the second year.
Okay.
Because of COVID, they couldn't have their regular season, so they decided to have a summer series.
Right.
This was out in St. Catharines. So we were quarantined out in St. Catharines for about, I would say, 6 weeks.
Okay.
From preseason to a small preseason where we had a chance to get our guys together, practice, and then jump into an 8-game season.
Wow.
And then championship, really. So we were able to put it all together, bring guys together. Our head coach did a great job of bringing guys back who were on the team last year.
Okay.
That way we had some cohesion and some chemistry, much better than the other teams who just brought guys who they can get who were available at that time. So
Right.
great experience, great league. What I like about the league is that it's 70% Canadian talent.
Wow.
Versus the NBL, where the NBL is more Americans than Canadians. So
Right.
it's great that we have our guys we've coached in high school, guys we've coached on national team, Ontario team, and now we're coaching them in the pros. I had to beat Peter McNeely, who I won a OUA championship at Ryerson, and now
Oh, wow.
now a CBL championship in St. Catharines. So to have those connections, it's
Yeah.
just incredible to connect those things with that league.
Well, especially when you talk about like, you have an 8-game season, and if other teams are just pulling whomever they can get, it definitely makes the difference, even if you have the smallest bit of a relationship and rapport with someone, because it's very quick. Learn plays, get into shape. This is the idea of our style of play that we want to sort of have.
Exactly.
And then, we have the bubble. So the NBA has gone to a bubble in Orlando, and we've seen how that has sort of worked out. I mean, now we're recording this on Tuesday. This was the first time, I think it was game 2 with Toronto and Boston, where we saw family members coming and being able to, be with the players, which Paul George spoke about a little bit, I think, over the weekend, and mentioned that, it's really hard being in the bubble, being away from your
So
friends and your family. Like the mental aspect of the game is more prevalent when you have less distractions around you, but you also don't have the same outlets that you may need in
exactly,
order to, take away from just focusing on basketball.
exactly.
And so you guys did something similar to that for the summer series in the CEBL. What was that like for your players in I guess the St. Catharines style bubble, when it came to, the mental preparation of playing a season?
It was difficult, right? So for guys, one, not having fans in the gym, it takes some getting used to.
For sure.
You can hear every sound, every call, which is a good thing for coaches because we need those calls.
Right. Yeah.
But usually in an arena, you can't hear all those calls, right? So it's a good thing. But just for the players, playing in an arena without fans was difficult. Like being in a hotel room and not being allowed to have your girlfriend or your son or your daughter or your wife even visit you. There
Yeah.
are a couple guys who got sent home for breaking those rules,
Oh, really?
costing their teammates or their team, wins because they couldn't do it.
Right.
right? And you realize how important that is to guys, like having your family with you. And I understand now why the NBA does it, because I've lived it.
Right.
Or you're talking to I'm talking to my son on Zoom or on WhatsApp video, and he's like, Dad, like, this is just too long. Like, when are you coming home?
Yeah.
And if my older son said it, I'd be like, oh, you're a grown man,
Yeah.
But my younger son, he's not usually an emotional guy. So he's
Right.
like, Dad, like, I need you to come home. Like, I miss you. And I'm like, my gosh. So I can imagine for guys like Giannis, guys like Paul George, guys like LeBron. LeBron has
Yeah.
three. To not see your kids and your wife, and being able to hold them. And while video is okay, it's way better than phones. Back in the day, it's just
Yeah.
seeing them almost hurts a little bit more.
For sure, right? Because they're close, but they're not
But
really,
they're
right?
not, right? So it's like a virtual reality thing where you have a relationship with someone, but you can't physically reach in and touch them
Yeah.
and be there, and all the things that you're missing. So my son dunked for the first time
Wow.
in practice, and I was away.
Yeah.
And when Miss J told me, she's like, "You wouldn't believe what happened in practice today." She's like, Jadaine dunked for the first time in game through traffic. And I'm like, oh my
Damn.
goodness. And that's something I wanted to be there for.
For
So
sure.
like being around in the bubble, being isolated from your family, it does a job on your mental. And even though you love the game, COVID makes you realize that, man, family is the most important thing in your life.
Right. And so I do want to get back to the mental side of it because you went to school for sports psychology. So I want to get back to that after we talk about this next point. So
Yeah.
you talked about, COVID bringing people together, right? Everyone's complained about 2020. 2020 is the worst year. Yes, we lost, my favorite basketball player, Kobe Bryant. We've had this pandemic, which has, shut countries down and, hurt our economy. We've had, we just lost, Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, who for so many things that he was a part of, when you look at like the filmography of what he's done, especially recently, played Jackie Robinson in 42, James Brown in Get Up. He played Black Panther in Civil War and Black Panther and Avengers. And we start to lose these people that we start to think, did we appreciate them while they were here? Because when Kobe Bryant retired in 2016, I believe,
Correct.
we were excited to see, okay, what's next for Kobe? And we saw the Mamba Academy sort of take off. We saw him really, and I don't think you can see it, but, really make this girl dad thing, super exciting.
Elevated the women's game and girls in general.
100%. I mean, he had impact, and I'm not going to say her last name because I would completely butcher it. But Sabrina, who went to Oregon and was like the first overall pick in the latest draft, I think for Washington, if
Correct.
I'm not mistaken. Elevated so many things, and still stayed in touch with NBA players, and was doing a lot of mental awareness and a lot of coaching. And we were excited to see what was going to come next. Was Gigi going to be that next star? Because look who her dad was, and look what he was doing.
Would have been, man.
Right, and that's what everybody says, right? So we lose Kobe. We have this pandemic, and we have people collecting, the Canadian Emergency Response Fund in Canada, and unemployment checks in the United States. And restaurants and bars and small mom and pop shops closing down. But the one thing, when we look at all of the negatives, and I was talking to my friend Jelani about this just the other day, this is the ultimate glass half full, glass half empty scenario. A lot of people are saying 2020 worst year ever, let's get back to 2021. But there are a lot of things that people are thankful for in 2020, and that is spending time with family members that they normally wouldn't because they were away working or travel a lot for work. And the family dynamic, I feel, is the one thing that people really got to expand and work on and enjoy. And I have two very small kids, so it was nice having both mom and dad home for the period of time that we were, because it meant that we got to see things like, for instance, my youngest daughter walking for the first time, right?
Wow.
And we don't want to take those things for granted. But then, as you alluded to before, your son dunking for the first time in game, in traffic, real speed. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the equivalent of you putting in the years of helping him develop and working on those skills that, unfortunately you miss those things. It's tough, right? Like how does that impact you knowing that I don't want to like rub it in, but like you're not going to be able to experience that first time with your son.
The impact is you feel it, like you feel
Yeah.
something. It's more of a pain in your chest,
Yeah.
and then an aftermath in your stomach.
Yeah.
And every time you think about it, it's just a sadness comes over your eyes. But that's been my life. It's my life has been on the road. Like for example, like a typical day in my life when I was working full time. So I'd work full time at the TDSB. From TDSB, I would head down to Ryerson, about 45 minutes to an hour traffic for team practices. And Monday, Tuesdays, we would practice, 6 to 8, 8 to 10. So
Jeez.
on Mondays, I'd be home late. Wednesday, Thursdays, daytime practices, and I'd miss some of those due to work.
Right.
Right. But then I'd come home and I would have to either run a practice for hoops, or I'd have to come home and do something for the family, or do a course, write a paper. Because at the same time, I was going to the Grand Canyon University for my degree in sports psychology. So
Jeez.
my mornings were jam packed, and that's on top of travel. So if we're traveling to Ottawa, or we're traveling to Laurier or Kingston, all these trips are with a bunch of guys, 16, 15 guys,
Yeah.
depending on how many red shirts we have. Like it takes a lot to coordinate and be there. So
Right.
being away from home as a coach is something that your family gets used to. You get used to it, and if it wasn't for COVID, I wouldn't realize how important it was for me to just be here 100%.
Right.
'Cause even being home, I'm the lead scout for some of the games and our other assistants. This year, I was the sole lead scout because our staff changed. So every night I'll be up 1, 2 a.m. watching
Jeez.
video, clipping games, personnel scout, team scout, personnel sheets, edits for guys, team edits. So it doesn't stop. For an assistant coach, it never stops. You
Right.
can't shut it off. I'd be in a restaurant cutting film, or thinking about what clips I'm going to use to show the guys tomorrow. So you're always working, and COVID allowed me to kind of stop and be here 100%. No school, no TDSB, no Ryerson. And I enjoyed that for about 6 weeks. And then and then St. Catherine's happened, and
Yeah.
Coach called and say, Coach, like we have a spot on our staff, and I want you to be a part of it. And it was hard to even make that decision.
Right.
Uh, and I talked to my kids first of all, which I usually talk with Miss J first. But
Yeah.
after spending so much time, with the boys, and I love the relationship we're developing. We're outside on the driveway every day, where there's a field across our home where it's open. We're doing exercises, agility, cardio. We're going out for walks, and we're spending time watching shows and playing video games. And I'm like, do I really want to be away from this right now?
So wait, you're playing video games? Like you're
Oh,
getting
I
on the
love
sticks?
I love video games, man. I
Oh
grew up
man.
video games. I'm the oldest of three brothers and a sister.
Okay.
So like I bought the first Nintendo in our house. Uh,
Wow.
First game I
Okay.
bought with it was Street Fighter.
Oh, okay. So, what is like your game of choice on, I guess, whatever the system or console that you have is now? So if they're like, Dad, we want to play, you choose what game we're playing. What are you bringing out?
So if we play Street Fighter, they don't have a chance.
Okay.
So they never want to play Street Fighter.
Fair
So
enough.
the game, I love fighting games. I think it gets you thinking and moving realistically. So the game we play is Dead or Alive.
Okay.
We play a lot of Dead or Alive as a family, and Blaze Blue.
Never
Where a
heard of that
game
one.
where it doesn't require a lot of technical button
Okay.
control. You can kind of figure it out. The combos are like built into a button, where Street Fighter is you have to actually do a hand movement, then a button to get the
Right.
combos to them up. So we play a lot of that. 2K. I grew up on NBA Live.
Right.
So it's been a hard transition to 2K because a lot of times you press the buttons and the things that you want to happen never happen.
Right.
So my son has mastered 2K. My oldest son, Jadain, has mastered 2K. So he's probably the best at 2K in the family right now. I still challenge him, but I would say I'd rather play him live than play him in 2K.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, are the boys Raptors fans?
No, the boys have all kind of branched off.
Okay.
Jadain loves Giannis. He loves Jason Tatum. The Damian Lillard fan, so he watches a lot of Boston, a lot of Milwaukee.
Okay.
My younger son is like he doesn't know, so he kind of just enjoys watching the game and playing the game and watch everybody. I think he likes Damian Lillard because of Damian Lillard's mentality.
Right.
And you can see Damian Lillard's size similar to his, where he is now, so it's easier to relate to that. But Jadain, probably biggest Jason Tatum fan. Studies him, all his sets. And because I'm a coach, he understands what to look for.
Right.
So he's looking at his form, he's looking at his space, he's looking at his shot quality, how he guards the ball, how he comes off screen. So he'll pull it up and say, Dad, look at this. Or Dad, can I watch Jason on Synergy? And he'll pull up all his clips and all his layups, all his dunks, all his threes, all his ball screens. So he's studying them, deliberately. He's not just an avid fan where he's like, oh my God, it's Jason.
Well, as long as he doesn't try to imitate his haircut and facial hair, I mean, then we're good to go. Because Jason Tatum's gets a little.
I don't know what he was doing with that one.
But it's interesting what you said about your youngest son. Looking at Dame Lillard as someone who he can relate to, right? And this is going to bring me back a little bit to Chadwick Boseman, and that is, people are really sleeping on the importance that he had. Now, obviously, he's not like the most important, black actor, but he was the first. And I'm not trying to like shit on Wesley Snipes. Yes, he was like the first black superhero, if you want to call Blade that. But Chadwick Boseman playing Black Panther was like the most relevant black superhero that we've really seen.
100%.
We had Blade, we had Storm from X-Men, but Chadwick Boseman really came into the fold as the main guy, right? Exactly. I mean, we've seen for years, I mean, up until Denzel, where black actors or actresses were always in a supporting role. But for the first time, we finally have men and women and superheroes and athletes especially, where you have young kids who now see something that they can relate to, something that they can aspire to. And this is the importance, again, I also place back on Kobe with Gigi. And that is, the WNBA was the WNBA. It wasn't going to be, or at least it wasn't at the time, an equivalent to the NBA. It was a league for women to play in, and it was continuing to grow. But Kobe really, I don't think he went out to do that to really change the way that women's basketball was looked at.
I think he did.
Kobe, you think he did? Okay.
Kobe doesn't do anything accidental.
No, that's true.
Kobe does
that's true.
Planned and executed, and where he's going to be, when he's going to be there, why he's there, what he wears, who he talks to. Kobe's one of the strategic minds of our generation, man. I truly miss that guy. I still go by and watch his stuff.
It's interesting because when it happened, my wife was upstairs. It was at our old house. She was in her room. She was doing something, and I had my oldest daughter, who at the time was just about to turn 3. And when I got the news, I didn't believe it. And then I got a few messages from my friends. And then when I turned on the coverage, I wept. I have not cried over the loss of someone that way that wasn't a family member.
Ever.
I was
ever.
The only thing I can remember is my grandma, who loved Princess Diana. When that news came out, I couldn't understand the emotion that someone was feeling that wasn't a family member.
Exactly.
But when Kobe passed and the news came out, I was completely devastated. And the other day, I don't know what happened. There was something that I was watching with my daughter, and I got like just a little emotional. There was I think I was actually rewatching Black Panther, and there was just a scene early on in the movie, and I just like, oh man, I can't believe he's not here, and I got like just a little teary eyed, a little emotional, and my daughter turns to me and she says, "Dad, was he the one? Was he the man who died?" And I was trying to wrap my head around like, what is she talking about? And she's like, the guy on the TV in the helicopter, and it brought me back to Kobe, and I was like, man, like they were at the time. I wasn't comparing them. I wasn't like,
Yeah.
the importance of Kobe, the importance of Chadwick Boseman, but it's like, yeah, you know what? They are in that sort of that tier, and in such a time where we celebrate lives, we've also gone down this road where we've had so much happen, especially in the United States, but also in Canada recently with some of like the social justice, if you want to call it, if the I don't want to just call it police brutality because I think it's like a little bit more because it's not just brutality, it's negligence, it's so many things, but the injustice towards you know some of the black people in America, and I want to say maybe Native American and people of color in Canada. It's crazy. And I want to bring this back to basketball because last week there was talks that the NBA was going to be canceled, that they were going to shut the season down and they weren't going to play anymore. And our guy, I'm going to call him our guy, LeBron was like, "No, we're done. We're finished." And a lot of people were like, "Well, why would the NBA players decide to postpone or boycott games?" And as a father of two, what were you asked about this at all? Did you address it? Did you have any sort of conversations about what has been going on recently, and sort of explaining to your kids, the importance of what is going on right now?
100%. Like, this is something that we live, but I'm going to tie all this together in a second, because I think Chadwick and Kobe is an important thing to address. And then I'm going to flow into connected to that. I think what both of those gentlemen did, Chadwick and Kobe, is that they elevated Black culture,
Yeah.
right? So, the difference between Chadwick and the rest of the American actors, they were always portrayed in somewhat of an American setting.
Yeah.
Whereas Chadwick with Black Panther was Black excellence. There
Right.
was a country that was hidden, that's at the peak of civilization, Black owned, Black led, and nobody knew about it. And for them to expose that to the world, kids started believing like, wow, like we can be that.
Yep.
And that's why his popularity grew so much. And not because he was the actor in the movie, but because that's who he was in real life.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure.
And that's why it transitioned into elevating him into the person we know him to be now. That was the person he always was. Right. So, hats off to him for what he did. I wish him all the best in the afterlife, and he deserves to be elevated, in the real life right now, real time, continuously, for what he's done for our culture. For Kobe, is the same thing. Kobe's mentality, Kobe's just edge of knowing what he wants and just knowing who he wants to go with is separated, because a lot of Black people, in general, because of all the negativity that surrounds us, is, we are kind of tempered, and we hold ourselves back based on other people's opinion, or the way other people are going to treat us, the way other people are going to react to us. So we restrict ourselves from becoming our full selves.
Right.
Kobe was not that guy.
Yeah.
Kobe was his full self in every moment.
Yeah, no, he definitely was.
Right? Whether you liked him, whether you hated him, it was of none of his concern. And he set his own standard for who he is. He never let anybody from the outside set his standard. And that's something I've adapted into my life just from watching him operate. And when you see the NBA where it is now, it's Kobe's mentality that has I'd say transitioned into a lot of these NBA players, where they understand that, life is more than basketball.
Yeah.
It's how, even though we're making millions, like I have nephews, I have cousins, I have brothers who are being mistreated in their communities, in their workplaces, right, in their schools,
Yeah.
and we have to do something to help them because God has placed us in this position where we have a platform, we have a stage, people are watching us nightly, people are listening to us, and for them to be able to say that, hey, we're going to walk away from this just to stand up for the race and show that what, no more of this.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's an incredible thing, and I just wish that we could progress as a race beyond awareness, because right now a lot of the things that we're doing is awareness. So for me, the conversations I have with my sons, which is your main question, is not about awareness.
Right.
It's about action. So what does it look like when you go to school? I want to know when a teacher talks to you in a certain way that makes you feel that you're not enough,
Right.
or you're not at that level. I want to know when something happens in the community, whether it's at the grocery store, whether you're just walking on the street. Like, I want to have those conversations with them. For them, it's like, how do you move on beyond this and develop a life, like life skills? And I think we don't talk about life skills enough with our young people. It's great to march. It's great to wear the t-shirts. It's great to put the fist up. But as you go out there every day, my wife and I, we've lived Black lives. We've
Yeah.
dedicated our lives in these communities where nobody wants to work, where nobody wants to teach, where nobody, people are afraid to visit these communities. And we've been in these communities working tirelessly to elevate Black lives. And I would say to everybody who's about the positivity, like, are you taking those action steps? Are you teaching our kids financial literacy? Are you teaching them about ownership? Are you
Yeah.
teaching them about higher education, but applied higher education, not just going to school for something that you can't use after, like, where is the industry? So giving them those things to move forward with, so they can actually change their lives. Because after you march, after you put up all the social media posts, like, people are still going to be people.
Yeah.
You know what I
No,
mean?
I think that's super important. I mean, financial literacy is always the one of the main things that I always talk about. And I don't want to say I was like financially like illiterate, but it definitely wasn't something that was there wasn't an importance placed on it. And whether that was supposed to be done by my parents or from our schooling institution, it wasn't until like I got married that my wife, who was, it was thrusted upon as like an immigrant to the country, that
Exactly.
they needed to, right? Like it was something that they were forced to figure out. Whereas
Exactly.
those who are fortunate to be, second, third, fourth generation Canadians didn't necessarily have that thrust upon them. They were just like, mom and dad are there to
Exactly.
to give us or to lead us. And with a lot of people who are 30, 40 something staying at home and not knowing responsibility because it wasn't really taught to them.
Exactly.
But that's not the case with, you know, some of our younger generation, right? Um, you can look no further than some of our main sports teams, sports organizations like the NFL or the NBA. Not so much the NHL, but again, I'm going to draw comparisons to the amount of non-white athletes. It's just not, there isn't an importance placed on it. And I know some leagues have symposiums where they have people come and talk about it. But I mean, the NHL, you don't really hear about people losing tons of money unless it's with like investing in the wrong thing. But that in itself is a privilege to be
Exactly.
able to invest in something,
Exactly.
right? Where if you look at some of the NFL players or the NBA players, you know, there are look at who is it, Antoine Walker, I believe, from when he was with the Boston Celtics, signed a huge contract, and 5 or 6 years out of the league was completely broke.
Completely
Um,
bankrupt.
right, and so you look at a guy like I'll go to a rapper, DMX, another guy who had financial woes, and you have to think that some of these guys who maybe aren't paying attention or maybe not paying attention, bad way to describe it, who where school isn't something that they can relate to, whether it was they didn't have the help, they didn't have the buy-in, they had a skill that they knew was going to take them to a certain level, that's where their tunnel vision was. But there
Exactly.
wasn't someone who was there to say, hey, listen, we need to, have a diverse
Invest
portfolio. Let's invest in
stocks,
this.
bonds.
Just saving money. Like, you don't need to buy all of these things, or, to help, the 17 different family members that have come out of the woods all of a sudden that you've made it. And then and then you have the difference of like a LeBron James. And people can say what you will about the athlete that he is, but LeBron James is definitely doing something where he's helping invest in not only his community, but players and athletes and anyone that he can sort of reach with his group of friends or, athletes, and then starting, his I Promise school. That is really one of the only people that we've sort of seen take that leadership role both on and off of the court.
Actually,
Similar to like a Kobe Bryant investing, but I mean, what LeBron has really done to elevate the people around him to bring them to that level is something that we haven't really seen outside of that.
and that's LeBron as a person is a
Yeah.
great man.
Yeah.
What he's done and what he continues to do is, I wish more people at his level would take those steps and do those things. Schools, as education, finances, take care of everybody in his circle. Make sure that they have homes and they're starting businesses. He's putting them in leadership positions. He's gone beyond awareness with his circle, and I think it's the same thing that we have to do as units, family units, is take our families into those things, right? And that's what me and Miss J try to do with our families. Like, no, it's time for you to buy a property. It's time for you to sell a property. It's time for you to invest in this stock. This stock is going up. It's gone up $15 in 2 days. Right, put $1,000 here. So we're trying to everyone around us who orbits around us, we try to elevate. But again, it's a small. Our reach is not as big as LeBron's. But
Right.
again, there's guys at LeBron's level who aren't doing that, and that's my message to most people. Is like, can you use your platform to elevate, the middle class? Can the middle class use their platform to elevate the lower class? The people are struggling. Can the lower class elevate themselves and then pull more people with them? That's the only way to create real change.
Right.
And if we all do that and replicate that over and over again, now we have buying power, and buying power in the right direction versus buying shoes and clothes and cars. Now we have equity where we can now make moves and buy $1 million properties and own things and businesses that
For sure.
transition into to growing wealth versus surviving from paycheck to paycheck or week to week or month to month. I think that's the next move for our people in terms of growth.
Now, I think it's important. I mean, one of the things that you just said is that, you're trying to help your circle of people and hoping that people who have status and a reach can do it. Now, not everybody has, I don't want to say the same reach, but I want to say the same maybe safety blanket that someone like LeBron James has, where they can afford to make a mistake and it not bury them in their career, right? He's invested in so many different things and he's the face of so many different things that a misstep for him, he'll still be able to rebound. And I think maybe people operate on a side of fear sometimes where they're afraid that if they do make that mistake, they say that wrong thing, they do that wrong thing, that they'll get buried and they don't have the social clout that LeBron James has. So let him do that. I'll take care of me and I'll support him, but people aren't willing to take the risks. Whereas someone like you who easily could say, listen, I don't really have a platform. I don't have the reach. So I'm not even going to worry about it. I'll let someone else do it. That is also a mentality that some people have as well. I only have, I'll use Instagram as an example. I only have like 100 followers. So me supporting these movements or really, engaging my community, it's not really going to make a difference. But, Coach Jay has 1,500 or 2,000. Let him do it and I'll support him. But sometimes in supporting, it's not enough because you're still going to miss out on some people that are part of your circle specifically, right?
Exactly.
And so it's great that you use those platforms. And I want to sort of transition to one of the things that you talked about when you said that you engage in your communities. Now, you have a background with youth, and we can all sort of say that youth are at the most impressionable age where they're going to learn the most about becoming an adult, right? You have a 13-year-old and you have a 16-year-old. I have what I like to call a three-nager. She's three going on a teenager.
Hold on, 13.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's one of those things where like I'm starting to realize that even though she's so young, she is picking up, learning, and understanding things at such a young age. Things
Right.
that I would never have dreamed that she would understand, and that's not just in words, but responsibility and actions, positives and negatives, and so I now with my wife understand the importance that we have as parents to understand that, listen, she may be 3, but she is starting to learn things that is going to affect her
Exactly.
for her entire life.
Entire life.
And so you engaging with Miss J with youth, right? When you worked for the city of Toronto, or Parks and Rec, what it was called back in the day.
Origin.
That's it. That's the beginning. And then even with the TDSB, you went to school at Centennial College for an advanced diploma in child and youth work. What was it at the time that made you want to engage in that age demographic, and what are some of the rewards that you're seeing now through your many years of working with that group?
It's a great question. I think for me, I was motivated to make change, on the ground floor, and that's why I started working with the city. I was probably the best basketball player in the community around Jane and Wilson at the time,
Okay.
and basketball wasn't a popular thing in that community. Like up the street was Jane and Finch, Shoreham, Falstaff was down the street, but in that Jane and Wilson catchment, like there was not a lot of basketball. So I started working at Chalk Farm Community Center, and I thought I was going there to teach kids basketball.
Right.
And then quickly I realized that, again, basketball is just a tool to get the kids, in the building, and get them in a safe zone to help them grow. So immediately Jay and I switched from sports and dance, and she was the dance instructor, I was the basketball instructor, and we quickly realized that we need to teach these kids life.
Yeah, for sure.
We need to teach them how to cook. We need to teach them. We need to teach them what it means to be punctual and be on time and not get left by the bus, or get your permission form signed, or what a credit card is, what credit is, just what taking your hygiene. Like
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe how much conversation we've had with kids about hygiene, and why school is important even though you don't like it, and the difference between being in a community center versus being in a school. So it was like a constant education, life education, when I worked for the City of Toronto Parks and Rec. And I decided to go back to Centennial because I wanted to not just help kids in the short term, but I wanted to help kids and youth in the long term. And I should say youth, not kids, because I also find that we have tons of funding. If you remember Parks and Rec, for kids programs or Tiny Tots programs, any after school, preschool program was well funded, overstaffed. I think their ratio at the time was maybe 5-1, or where ours was 15-1.
Right.
So we had less staffing dollars, less program dollars, and less extracurricular activity dollars. So generally in the community, youth programs weren't funded.
Right.
And people, let's take care of the kids, let's take care of your kids. But as they got to the youth age, they can take care of themselves. But that's the age we found that they didn't know what they wanted to do. They didn't know what direction they were going. They didn't know what place they were in the world. And I went back to school just to make sure that the information that I'm giving them is the right information, the relationships that we're building are the right relationships, and we're infusing positivity into them. We're infusing hope and inspiring them to be more than their circumstances, to be more than their environments. And now the rewards are, Ms. J and I, we have to actually turn down weddings and, birthday parties and showers, and we had to move out the community just to have a life.
Right.
because kids would just show up to our doors, or we would go to the mall to buy something, and we would end up talking. We became local celebrities in the
Right.
community with the work we did, where parents would meet us and say, "Hey, like, I don't know what you did with my son, or I
Yeah.
don't know what you did with my daughter, but thank you." And those stories were like on and on and a constant. And now to see a lot of those kids from back, maybe 15, 17 years ago, now married, now owning homes, now it's incredible. It's incredible.
Now it's interesting, and I don't want to, take away from the importance of what you just said.
Mhm.
Um, I find it hard to believe Miss J doesn't want to go to weddings because I was lucky enough to have the privilege of having her at my wedding, and I
You
can't. I
special to her.
looking at the video, she tried to leave like 17 times, and every single time it was just like another song came on. She was like, "All right, I'm gonna stay for one more song," and she closed it out with us. So was it really you saying, "Listen, we can't do all the weddings," or was it Miss J? Because
You
my
know
money's
what?
on you.
No, it became so overwhelming, that we both said, like, wow, like the year before COVID,
Yeah.
we must have done maybe, I would say, 12 to 14 weddings.
Damn.
It's like, my goodness. I'm like, we're gonna go broke. Dropping $500 here, $700 here, $1,000 here,
Yeah.
on each of our, past, I'd say, participants, students, because for us it includes everything. For her, it's City of Toronto Parks
Yeah.
and Rec. For me, it's both, basketball, from the community now to the school side, now to the university side, now to, like, so it's always something happening, and you know players love coaches who love them.
100%. Right.
And they always want you to be a part of it. But sadly, we can't do all of them, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm sure people understand that,
Oh,
that
definitely.
they know the importance that you have in the community. They know you're not, the only one. And like I said, trying to schedule this, I understand you're a busy man. Like it was like, all right, you have your days where, you can't do stuff. I have like my 2 trash night TV nights with my wife where I'm like 90 Day Fiance, can't give that up. It's the understanding that we
Important.
have.
Important.
But I want to talk about sports psychology
Okay.
because I think now is there's way more of an importance placed on psychology, especially in sports, than there was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. We recently had Kevin Love come out and DeMar DeRozan come out and talk about the depression and anxiety that they felt, being an athlete and with traveling and being isolated and alone. And, this time with COVID really put pressure on people who didn't have those outlets that they use, whether it was going to a doctor or going to gatherings to talk to people. They were stuck in their homes and left sometimes alone to deal with it. Now you went to Grand Canyon University and got your Bachelor of Science in psychology with an emphasis in performance and sports psychology. And what was your reason to go, again, sports psychology, not exactly the most flashy uh, thing to study, but why did you feel that it was important, and how have you used it in your coaching career with some of the athletes that and students that you've sort of come in contact with?
So again, for me, going to Ryerson University, I originally went to Ryerson University for my advanced diploma. I did my advanced diploma at Centennial College,
Right.
and it was to transition into Ryerson University. So I went to Ryerson University, started actually my first 3 classes, and my classes were Monday nights and Tuesday nights. So one night I decided to go to the Ryerson men's practice because class finished early.
Okay.
And there I met Coach Roy Rani. And after practice, I watched it, and I was amazed because the year prior to that, I took a year off to travel North America and just see basketball on all different levels, in hopes that I'm going to make Hoops Canada the best program for our kids possible. And after speaking to Roy Rani after practice, he said to me, he's like, the questions you're asking me have never been, no one has come in here and asked me these questions after practice.
Wow.
What's going on in your head? I want to know more. And from that practice, he's like, I want you to come back next week, and I want you to come back next week, and I want you to come back next week. So each week after class, I would go by practices, and I went from just being on the sideline to being at the score table. And then a night somebody was short or coaches didn't show up, and he's like, come on the floor. And it just kept building. And he said to me, he's like, I know you're doing child and youth work, but what do you think about actually being a part of the game at this level, and actually making an impact with the stuff you've done in the community, with the experience you have, with the players that you've developed through Hoops Canada. I think you can contribute to this level, and I think studying something else and not being a student will allow you to be a part of the staff. And I started exploring, and ironically, as one night after practice, he's speaking to me, and the athletic director comes downstairs.
Oh, wow.
And our athletic director at the time was Ivan Joseph.
Okay.
And Ivan Joseph is a PhD, or I should say Dr. Joseph, is a PhD in sports psychology.
Oh, wow.
And he starts to tell me his story. Coach Ryan introduced me to him, and he starts telling me his story, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. First of all, I've never met a black man with a PhD before.
Yeah.
In person.
Right.
In person. And he's like, let's step to the side. Let's talk. What are you thinking? What are your aspirations? He's like, Roy's told me great things about you, and you're coming from class to here and, picking things up and learning and asking the right questions. And, what do you think about sports psychology? And I'm like, wow, like, I've never thought about it. And he's like, think about it some more. Here's some links, study it. This is what I've done. This is what I was able to do with it. And from that conversation, I went on a journey of research and how can I do this? So I immediately transitioned from Ryerson to Grand Canyon, which was the most suitable program because of the flexibility of doing it in the evenings and not being able to do practice, work, family, hoops. It allowed me to
real estate.
real estate.
Geez.
It allowed me to be mobile and still get it done.
Right.
And that decision was probably one of the best decisions I've made, because the mental aspect of the game is the most important aspect of the game.
Right.
And giving players tools, and a lot of people don't understand the anxiety that goes with sports, especially high performance sports. And there's a difference between recreation sports and high performance sports. Whereas high performance sports, you're expected to win.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't win, you don't have a job.
Right.
So it put pressures not just on the athletes, but it put pressures on the coaching staff. So it's very business minded. So I'm coming from a community-based experience where I'm helping young athletes, helping young people, helping young families grow up and use the game to elevate themselves, to now an environment where it's strictly about winning and getting your athletes to perform at a high level. But while we're trying to get our athletes to perform at a high level, you ignore the mental side of it, where you see, DeMar DeRozan expressed it, Kevin Love expressed it. A lot of times coaches are like, I don't have time for that.
Right, for sure.
Like, go figure it out. Like, I need you to perform. And sports psychology has changed that. And it's saying to coaches, like, you have to care about your athletes, because their mental state equals their physical performance on the court. All right. So we need to give our athletes pregame tools, whether it's meditation, whether it's visualization, whether it's listening to a motivational video, whether it's reading, some athletes read their Bibles before games. Whether it's looking at a tattoo on your arm or tattooing something on your fingers that you can look at to just keep you in that zone of performance. So before you step on the court, where's your mindset, right? Then giving coaches the tools for them to help their athletes perform within the game. So there are guys you can yell at and get them to perform, and there are athletes you can't yell at. There are athletes you have to have a conversation with. So, that athlete walks off the court, and the coach is in I would say a hyperextended state where he has to know that I can't talk to this guy at this time. I have to let one of my assistants talk to this guy, get him back, and then put him in the game, right? So that's in-game live psychology of knowing your athletes. And then for some athletes, your best athletes usually recover the worst.
Right.
So post game, understanding each athlete's after the game, like, where's your mindset? What do you need to do after a game? What do you need to bring yourself back down? Is it spending time with your family? Is it, therapy? Is it going for a walk? Is it watching a movie? So all those things, like taking care of your athlete in a full cycle, and catering to what mental state they are is probably the most important thing right now for coaching staff. And it's what keeps you in tune with your athletes and keeps them performing, and they love you for it.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting because people seem to forget that athletes are people too, right?
Oh my gosh.
They like there's so much pressure and anxiety, and if you have, let's just say like a high anxiety job, right? People can only take so much if they don't have the outlets to sort of decompress. And that's just like, a grocery store worker or a mail person, they always, that saying of going postal, right? It's just, there's so much anxiety in some of these jobs that unless you have the right valve and release, sometimes people break. And we seem to think of athletes and actors and actresses as these superheroes where we have these demands to perform in front of tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people
Millions.
on a daily basis. And we expect that, they perform, and if they have an off day, people let them have it, right? I mean, unfortunately, the drawback of a social media with some athletes who put themselves out there to talk with, with fans, you can never win. And when you have, a poor performance, and then you have all of this negativity that's being filtered into your social media by fans or people yelling at you or throwing things at your bus or your plane or whatever it is,
Exactly.
that we seem to forget that these people are humans. Like, they're a human being at the end of the day. And it's hard for them to have the outlet also because, they play in the game. They immediately go into the post game press conference. So they're either being interviewed at their stall or in front of a panel of people.
Exactly.
And so, you have a bad game, and some of these reporters, like, they're trying to get a story. They're trying to get that clickbait.
Take you off guard.
Right. They're going to push your buttons a little bit in order to get, the worst out of you, depending on what their motive is. And it causes some people to not want to talk to them, but it also doesn't allow them to, decompress or to figure it out. And then, less than 24 hours later, they're back at it again, expected to perform at a high level. And, you talked about it with Hoops Canada, and I want to get into that a little bit. When I was doing a little bit of research, you have tiers to Hoops Canada. But before we get into the tiers, can you explain those tiers, but also how Hoops Canada became something that you thought was important and that you wanted to do?
So Hoops Canada became important. I can even I'll go all the way back to me in high school. So in high school, and my coach said it to me, he's like, you're the best player, coming back for a team next year, and I want you, this is going to be your year to open up and show everybody what you're about. And the year came by, I was excited. I practiced every day. I was outside in the cage under the heated sun and, improve my hops, my shooting, my ball handling, and I was ready to go. I come back to school in September, strike. Right. And coach was like, my coach is a great guy, Keith Johnson at the time, who's helped me tremendously and exposed me to the game, thinking the game, I would say. And he said, like, you know what, he wanted to coach us regardless of the strike. And, he started to coach us, run practices, and the rest of the teachers kind of turned on him and say, you know what, you're not supporting us. You can't, if there's no sports, you can't be in the gym with guys because it's not a part of us. So it put pressure on him, kind of threatened his career. And then they finally decided, you know what, we're just going to cancel the season period. So that affected me as a young athlete. So years later, I left the city of Toronto and I started working with the school board. And I think from just my reputation in the community and coaching, like I was probably, 20 coaching guys who were 25, 30.
Oh, wow.
In the community at the time. And I developed the reputation of somebody who knows the game and, are able to connect with athletes and kind of get them to perform and work together from different communities. Because, if you know the Jane and Finch communities, many of those guys don't cross the line. They don't talk to each other, even though they live 5 minutes apart. So I was able to put those guys together in the same gym and have them work together and travel safely from one spot to the next spot, and to and from. So my experience there kind of allowed me to branch into, coaching at the school level. And once I got to the school level, I did the same thing in Jane and Finch, where I was able to get guys from Driftwood to play with guys from Connections.
Right.
Guys from Rexdale to come in and participate and have a safe environment. And 2 years into it, again, another teacher strike.
Yeah.
And the season's canceled. So these kids had nowhere to go. And, I lost a lot of those guys because there was no basketball, because they had no motivation to come to school.
Right.
So this is me going through it. Then a couple of years, into it, one of my team going into it. And the third time it happened. So I've been through 3 strikes. I missed this one this year because I was off. So there's been 4 strikes since I've been a part of the TDS. And, Ms. J said to me, he's like, you keep investing so much into these kids and into these schools. Like, why not just do your own thing? And that way you are in control and, you don't have to worry about a strike ever.
Right.
She said it to me for many years, but in the third strike, it kind of struck.
Yeah, it was kind of like, all right, yeah, like she's right. It's you keep being derailed by something that's completely out of your control.
My control.
Take control.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the start. That was the start of Hoops Canada. And, she registered it. She did all the research and she brought me a book and, she wrote Hoops Canada on it. And she's like, it's time. And that's how it started. And I was able to kind of take all the ideas out of my head. And you know how Miss J is. Miss J sits you down. She draws out every idea. She puts it in writing, because if it's not in writing and it's not on paper, it's not valid.
Right.
So she sat me down. She's like, what do you want it to look like? What's your vision? Where do you want it to start? What age groups? What's the training process? What's step one? So that's where all our tiers come from. And anybody who reads our website can see the brains behind Hoops Canada. It's put out there for everybody to see, and there's no secret to it.
Right.
We train everybody from age 4 all the way up to 18 and now beyond, because most of our guys have moved on to universities and now pros, and it's just grown into something incredible that we're proud of. We're very, very proud of. And in terms of tiers, we try to teach. We try not to eliminate anybody from the game.
Right. So you're just trying to be as inclusive as possible, right?
Exactly, because we believe the game can be taught. Right, basketball is a learned sport, where other organizations, who when we first came out, they're like, "You guys are crazy. This is never going to work." You have to take the best talent, and you have to steal the talent from everybody else to create the best team to win. That's what's going to bring you the attention. And I'm like, that's just not my MO. I've always been a people person in terms of developing minds and bodies at the same time, versus just dragging a bunch of people and putting them together and hoping that it's going to work out. I'd rather take the long route, where we're going to build each player, each athlete, brick by brick, and they know that we care about them and we are loyal to them, and in turn they're loyal to us, which is what has changed it. So you can come in at a skill level where you're just working on skill and learning the game from just an individual standpoint. You can come in at a team, development standpoint, where you're learning now systems, passing, cutting, defensive concepts with 5 players on the floor, or building up to 5 players on the floor, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5. Or you can come in at the elite level where you've played basketball, you're from a basketball family, and you're just ready to learn the X's and O's and, being exposed to the high level competition, where we're traveling to Kentucky, we're traveling to Chicago, we're traveling to Florida, and you're going to play the best of the best from around the world. So whatever level that you are at, we have access to a program for you. And that's what I wanted to put out there.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because like you talked about some of the criticism that people said, listen, you just get the best players and put them on the court. But it's the inclusivity that really goes back to like everything that we've talked about today. And that is, not leaving anyone behind, right? Making sure that everyone feels that they have the option, whether it's just a recreational standpoint or the elite level, there's room for everyone to be there. Because when we start to sort of say, no, you don't fit into our categories, we don't have space for you, that's how people get left behind and people decide to, give up on things. And that's just not like your MO from building communities from, Parks and Rec to TDSB to your local communities and neighborhoods to Hoops Canada. It's all about, getting the best out of people and making sure that everyone knows that they are appreciated and knows that, there's something for them. It's just a matter of let's figure that out together, right?
Exactly.
Now I got to ask you, we've talked about Hoops Canada. We've talked a little basketball. I want to know that if, there was a coaching style, if you had to pick one coach, any sport, any generation, era, whatever, that you would say, I want that legacy or relates to me with, my, mentality or whatever, who would that coach be? Any sport.
I'm basketball all the way, so it's a lot of combination. In my early days, I was more Greg Popovich.
Okay.
Right, I was a lot of Greg Popovich, very stern, fear but firm. Right. Guys knew what I wanted. I drove guys to their max level. In terms of discipline, you had to do it the right way, and you had to do it at a high level repeatedly. And some guys could take it, some guys couldn't, but I got the best results that way because that's the only way I knew.
Right.
As I grew and I did my child and youth work and, then my sports psychology and then just interacting, just my experience at Ryerson of being around the total game. So I was able to see the game from the community level to the high school level to the club AAU level, then the university level, then the provincial level, and then the national level through all the camps. And then also, again, Coach Rana being in Sacramento, as an assistant coach and somewhat of a staff. He oversees the staff basically. He was able to bring me down there and I spent a week and saw the game at the NBA level where I interacted with, the GMs, the president of the organization, the sports psychologist, the therapist. So I've seen the game at every level.
Right.
And, just being able to have that perspective has allowed me to become more like Steve Kerr, where it's, I can build a relationship with my players, but I can drive them at the same time. I understand that they're players, but they're also human beings. So they need time with their families. You need to get to know their families. You need to build that almost a therapeutic relationship, if I'm using, sports psychology or child and youth terms, and make it genuine. Like, it's not just, hey, how are you doing? It's really like, how are you doing?
Right.
Tell me, listen and hear and feel what your athletes are saying to you. So I would say, from a man's standpoint, I would say Doc Rivers as well. Like, Doc Rivers is, tried and true, like the player's coach.
Right.
Nobody looks up for their players like Doc Rivers looks up for his players.
For sure.
But just creating culture, Steve Kerr, creating a high level performance, definitely Popovich. And, just the kind of man or I want my guys to see me as would be Doc Rivers.
Interesting that you picked those three coaches. I mean, it's interesting that you said like Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr, because you pick like the teacher and then the disciple, right? Like Steve Kerr got his coaching pedigree and understanding from Greg Popovich. But I'm curious to ask you this. We see Steve Kerr succeed and have the ability to coach those players in Golden State. Does Steve Kerr still have, that relationship and coaching style if he took that New York Knicks job? Do we see that same coach that we see now with Golden State if he went and spent, I'm going to say 3 years as the Knicks head coach, because there's no chance he lasted longer than that?
You know what? New York is a tough place to coach, tough place to play. We all know that. And again, it's everything is not just your players, it's the organization.
Yeah.
People always say if you have talent, you win, but I believe that leadership is where talent starts. Like talent wants to play for good leadership.
Yeah.
And you can see why Cleveland lost LeBron because he no longer wanted to play for that leadership, right? So Steve Kerr, in his intelligence, knew that New York wasn't the right place for him. Right. And because he knew the style of game that he wanted to coach and the relationships that he wanted to coach. And Mark Jackson already built that rapport with those guys and trained them in that sense. Steve Kerr was, he saw the opportunity to go in and elevate that to where it's now, I'm going to use the stuff I learned from Phil Jackson. I'm going to use the stuff I learned from Greg Popovich, and I'm going to bring it into this young core and transform them into the Bulls, transform them into the Spurs. Like he had that vision going in. So he knew New York wasn't going to be a spot for him from the start, I think.
I think it was the best thing for his career because New York that's just a tough franchise to play with or play for sure, or even coach for. To be honest, they don't do a good job of treating even their past players with any sort of respect or anything like that.
Exactly.
So we've done pretty good. We're gonna wrap up shortly, but I gotta ask you. Okay, I'm a big sports movie guy. Okay, I love me some sports, and as you're talking about your experience and what you want to get out, I'm hearing a little bit of Coach Carter. Coach Boone from Remember the Titans.
Okay.
Now, if you got to be, a head coach of any of these, famous movies, whether it's a skipper in baseball or coach in basketball or head coach in football or whatever, if you got to play and be, one of these coaches from any sports movie, your choice, who would you be and why?
You know what? I think it's easy because I love Coach Carter. That was one of my favorite movies, and I always get that comparison.
Okay.
Because Coach Carter went into a local community and did more than teach basketball. He developed men.
That's right.
That's always been my MO. People know that if you're around me, you're not just going to develop as a basketball player. You're going to develop as a man or a young woman. And we're going to teach you responsibility. We're going to give you life skills to move forward, to elevate yourself into, being a good husband, into being a good wife, into being a good father, good dog, like whatever it is to transition you and elevate you to, I would say self-actualization, where you're no longer, on the basic level of the Maslow pyramid. You're now elevating your life into where you're developing strong friendships, strong relationships. You can function in a business environment. You can develop, relationships that transition you into other relationships,
right? And
you can pass that on to your children. So I think that's what Coach Carter did in that movie. So that would be an easy one for me. Coach Carter, while I like the social justice element in in that movie, what that Denzel was in, I appreciate Coach Carter's methods and his ability to transform that community and young men much more.
Well, it's interesting because Coach Carter is based on a real story, right? Like Coach Carter, there was Ken Carter was a real guy, with a real story and a real, wanting to go and do that. So that's a hell of a great coach if you got to be one. And then here we go, some NBA and NFL predictions, because prior to this podcast, I had asked you, are you a Raptor fan? And you shocked me by saying, you're a Laker fan, because obviously I'm a huge Laker fan, always have been, always will be. Finally, something to cheer about. Who is winning the NBA title? And we can be unbiased. Listen, we've had some hard years where the Lakers have been trash, just been complete doo-doo. So, in your mind, from what you've seen, because obviously the bubble has changed a lot of things. Like the bubble is like the ultimate equalizer, I would say. Like it's been tough on some of the teams that we didn't think would struggle. It's given opportunities to teams that, maybe were injured and got to, get a little healthy. Who is coming out of the West? Who's coming out of the East? and who's winning that NBA title?
See, I'm torn because I love LA, but I love Doc Rivers. So I see the West. I see the West coming down to the Clippers and the Lakers.
Okay.
Naturally, I love to see the Lakers win, but wow, the Clippers, man, like they play. If I was coaching, if I had to coach a team,
Yeah.
and you gave me the Laker team and you gave me the Clipper team, I would coach a Clipper team. Just because of the edge and aggression that they play with. Like
Right.
they get down and they just get to work. It's very cerebral. Whereas the Lakers, LeBron is the show. Like he's guiding guys. But you have one guy bringing everybody else along. Whereas the Clippers, it's all 12 guys coming at you at the same time. So it's going to be interesting. I think whoever comes out the West, and if it's the Lakers, they win the championship. If it's the Clippers, they win the championship. Because the Clippers are structured in a way they can cover two great perimeter guys. They won't have any issues covering bigs in the East, and it's going to be a tough matchup for any East team that gets the Clippers or the Lakers. You can't cover AD. Absolutely love Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis with defensive efficiency numbers are through the roof. LeBron's ability to play the whole game, and from the defensive side to passing the ball to taking shots to directing guys and putting them in the right spots. It's just great basketball.
No, listen, don't sleep on Alex Caruso, okay? Like, how are you going to mention the Lakers' success and not talk about Alex Caruso?
Shot maker, he can finish in the lane, can guard, plays above the rim. Like, no, great talent.
It's all right. So who do you got coming out of the East then?
So out of the East, I like Milwaukee.
Oh wow! Okay, interesting.
I like Milwaukee. My son and I, like my 2K team is Milwaukee.
Okay.
I've kind of used them. Their shooting isn't great, but Giannis is just a great person. He's a great human being. I love him as a person, love him as a player. Last year, the Raptors knocked them out, which I love to see. I think we needed that win as a city, as a country.
For sure.
It was important. So I'd love to see Giannis come back and, redeem himself and put it up, put his money where his mouth is. You know what I mean? And see if he can get over the hump, right? So I think he's a tough matchup. He's the toughest matchup for anybody in the West.
I think them losing Malcolm Brogdon really is going to show, because like he was a guy who could create his own shot. He was a guy who really stepped up in the playoffs last year, and it's sort of like the missing piece that Milwaukee hasn't had this year. I thought he was incredible in the playoffs. So prior to the season starting, I said, listen, Golden State without KD, without Klay Thompson, it wasn't going to be the year. I thought maybe it's going to be a renaissance year. So I picked preseason the Lakers and the Boston Celtics. And right now, if you ask me pre-COVID, or sorry, pre-bubble, going into the bubble, who would it be? It'd be, pardon me, it'd be hard to not pick the Raptors. It'd be really hard because they played every team in the NBA incredibly well, except the Boston Celtics.
Except Boston.
It's the only team that beat them twice in the bubble. And by like large margins too.
Large numbers. It's just tough matchups for those guards.
Yeah.
Boston just has those guards that it's tough, makes it tough for Toronto to match up with. They're shot makers. They make them work on the defensive end, and they have to play both ways, where other guards, they can kind of, bully over, or they're non-shooters and they can kind of back off and play that 2-3 zone. But with the Boston guards, they have to guard, 48 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, like you name them, Jaylen Brown. I think the best thing that they don't have right now is Kemba Walker. Gordon Hayward. He's like the only piece that like just doesn't fit on this team, and him not being there, being able to play, is probably the best thing for Boston. I have Miami beating Milwaukee. I know Milwaukee dropped game 1 against Orlando and then won 4 straight. And I know they just lost game 1 to Miami. But Jimmy Butler is I mean,
Jimmy Butler's a Clipper.
like Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero. I mean, like if you look at that squad, I just think that they're like that tenacious team
Yeah.
that is playing with house money amongst any other team right now in the playoffs right now. Miami Heat are playing with house money. Milwaukee's expected to beat them. And Jimmy Butler did not invite any family or friends to the bubble because he said, I have a job to do. To me, it's just business. I think that's a hell of a mentality. I think Boston, Miami in the Eastern Conference Final. Pardon me?
In the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I think Boston. I was talking to my friend Jelani today, and I said, listen, Toronto's gotta win. They can't have moral victories in game 2. They can't say, oh, we got blown out game 1 and we only lost by 5 or less points in game 2. You have to win game 2, because I don't think you're gonna win 4 of the remaining 5 games. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Yeah. So
it's tough. Toronto's put themselves in a tough situation, just
for sure,
from losing game 1. They knew Boston is a bad matchup for them. Yeah. So the worst thing to do from a psychological standpoint is go in and get blown out in game 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, with all the emotions that occurred before game 1, like Toronto is probably one of the teams most affected by that publicly.
Yeah, for sure.
Their coach expressed himself, their players expressed themselves, or other guys kind of just stayed quiet and let the leaders in the NBA do the talking. The Raptors took the different angle where they actually spoke their feelings and true emotions and expressed it for national television. So they went into that game not really focused on basketball.
For sure.
And I think that kind of Boston came and punched them in the mouth. And, they recovered for game 2, but again, Boston's already has the momentum going on their side. So Boston now is going to, buckle down, watch more film, neutralize Van Fleet's shooting. Kyle is not 100%.
Yeah.
Take away that spin move from Siakam, neutralize, I would say, I forgot his name, the big forward on the perimeter. Just keep him shooting.
Yeah.
Gasol.
Marc Gasol, there we go. Yeah.
And keep Serge off the boards. And so Boston, you can see Boston is strategizing, whereas Toronto is not at their usual level of preparation. Yeah. And that's what's affecting them. With Jimmy Butler is a different animal, man.
And the same beast, to quote Kobe Bryant.
Right? Hi, yes, sir. Yeah. I like it. But that's what you get with a guy who had to go through JUCO for 2 years and go through that grind. And people don't realize what JUCO is. JUCO, you don't go to JUCO. You survive JUCO.
That's right.
Like Jimmy Butler survived JUCO and then made it into Division I and then into the league and then fought his way in Chicago to become a player. So that mentality that he has going now and teaming up with one of the most, I would say, aggressive coaches, tough mental guys of all time. Like when you read Miami's culture or you watch it, they won't even let you into practice. Yeah. They don't want you to see it. Right? Like the expectation and the standards in Miami is perfect for what Jimmy Butler is accustomed to and the way he came up. So I'm not surprised he's thriving there. I think Milwaukee losing Brogdon is the shooting that's going to affect them. But I think they can figure it out. If they figure it out for the next game and they, able to make some shots, it's going to be an interesting series. I'd love to see Milwaukee come out and you know what I mean, do something positive over there.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be a hell of a series. I don't think the only sweep I can see happening right now is Toronto just is emotionally drained. Exactly. Right? I think they'll still get a game. They might even get 2. I don't think they're going to win 2 in a row. But the other thing that Toronto has to deal with is the Masai video being released. Right? Like we're talking about all the social justice, all of the positive things that they're saying. But when they won the championship last year, so over a year later, after we hear like the lawsuit is on, then it gets dropped, and then there's a personal lawsuit from the sheriff to against Masai, then we get the video. And the video footage validates everything that Masai Ujiri said when, he's trying to get onto the court. Sure. Should he have had his credentials on him? Sure. Does that mean that he should be treated the way that he was? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
This guy just put together a historic NBA team, is about to celebrate the greatest moment in the history of his life and what many people will never accomplish
Exactly.
ever. Defeated a team that people had, claimed as like the best franchise over the last, 10 years. And here's
Yes.
Toronto with a mercenary in Kawhi Leonard. And all he wants to do is get on the court to celebrate. And he's actually pretty calm and composed up until that point.
Reaching for his credential.
Yeah, so sure, he gets up there, he gets questioned, he's about to reach for it, push number one. The Masai's like, what the hell are you doing? Push number two. Now everyone can understand what Masai's next reaction is going to be, because it is very evident that Masai didn't do anything aggressive to start the altercation. And you can very easily see that if that was anybody other than Masai, if that was Larry Tannenbaum, if that was Nick Nurse, if that was anybody who was white, they're not going to be treated that same way.
100%.
And for the Raptors to then get this validation among everything that is going on right now, there is an emotional letdown. There is the adrenaline dump after all of this, that they now have to go out and play basketball against a team that doesn't need to do that, a team that's well rested like them after sweeping their first round matchup. Toronto had to deal with a lot of stuff mentally off the court, and I think it's not that they're not talented. I think they are arguably a top 3 team in the NBA, the way that they played. It's just hard. It's just hard, and I think just too much to ask for this year.
It's tough. It's just a series of unfortunate events for the Raptors. And, like, even though we're Laker fans, we're still Toronto. We live in
For
Toronto.
sure.
We go in Toronto. We know these guys, more closely. Like I see some of these guys in national team practices or coming up to Ryerson to work out, sometimes 10 p.m., midnight to get shots up because they just want to get away from the arena and the usual. So like you get to see them on a local level, and you're rooting for them, and you want to see them do well. Like having Messiah as just a black president or GM, or like he's just an example for the community, and
for sure
to see him get some redemption from that scene, and thank God for videos and cell phones, and where in the past where these things would happen, and he would be painted black basically,
for sure,
and not to you, and just to have that is something else, and it happens more often than people give credit for. And I think with all these video footages, it's starting to really show visually that this is undeniable at this point. And it's the same things, like it's not just Masai. Like I have to have these conversations with my sons on a regular basis, like same thing with my wife and I. Like we drive really nice cars, and like if I get pulled over for no reason on a regular basis. There's one incident, I got onto the highway, one exit, I got pulled over in under 30 seconds.
Wow.
For speeding while I'm going around the turn. And I'm like, how can I speed around the turn? I can't do 150 around the roundabout. And not only did I get pulled over, I got pulled over. I'm taking my sons to football practice, and pulled me over, confiscates my car, and leaving me and my 2 sons on the side of the highway.
Jeez, man.
You know what I mean? Why? Because I'm a black man driving a Mercedes, and my kids. Now think about it. Up to this day, my kids still talk about that incident. They're like, "Dad, like we weren't speeding."
Right.
Because in a Mercedes, you can see the speed limit. Like your speedometer is big. It's digital.
Yeah.
You can see the numbers, and they're like, we weren't speeding. And these are 2 kids that I have to break this down to. They're like, there are people passing us. It's simply because the car that we're driving, and they don't expect us to be driving this kind of car in this community. And I'm like, this stuff shouldn't stop you from, driving this kind of cars. You just have to get a dash cam, record things when you go to court, like stay calm. Don't react when the officer is talking to you. Don't Don't give him any negative emotions. Keep it in, and then wait for your day in court. And
Right.
that's what I've done. You know, I've waited for those arbitration moments where you get a chance to tell your story, and you know, hopefully the facts will come out. And if there's video, now you can get video on a regular basis, whether it's a
Yeah.
phone, it's a street cam, like you can record it and prove yourself to vindicate yourself, because in the past that didn't happen. So I was thrilled to watch the Messiah video, and happy for him to that his reputation wasn't tainted by that incident.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you were going through, his title. Um, it just reminded me of Bobby Webster, and anybody outside of Toronto
Mm-hmm.
probably doesn't know who Bobby Webster is. Doesn't know that Toronto has a general manager, right? They think that Usai is the guy. Masai's doing everything, whereas we have Bobby Webster, who is a white guy. So if that's Bobby Webster who's going on to the court, do you think he's being treated that way? Hell no. Right? Like he'll get the benefit of the doubt. He'll get the sure, show me your credentials. Oh, you don't have it, just pull it out, no problem.
Exactly. Which is what Leo Round said. And I credit Leo for that.
Yeah.
Leo came out and he said, you know what? I didn't get searched. And if I didn't have my credentials, they'll just allow me to walk onto the court. So again, I think what you're seeing now in today's society is way different from what happened before, whereas it's a global, I would say, action for social justice, which is before it was like extreme, very narrow. Now it's very wide, and every race, every culture, all age groups are involved in it. You know, for me, it's just like, let's keep elevating it and take action steps to build wealth, because we can do all the things and not have the funds to back it up and be back where we started. So, you know, push business ownership, push higher education, you know, push, you know, acquiring real estate, push savings, bank account, growing, buying stocks, investing, all those things where you can actually make change and continue to grow, and elevate yourself and elevate your family and those around you. I think that's a good starting point for the most basic person who don't have a social media platform, who hasn't had a position of power, you know, who don't have as much influence as people who do. Like, affect your orbit.
For sure. I mean, in the wake of everything that sort of happened, we've seen CEOs or owners of businesses decide that they're going to step down and hope that their position gets filled with someone of color, right? Just because, I mean, if you look at these board of directors, if you look at the NBA as an example, over 50% of the players are black. Exactly. And there are no owners that are black. The NFL maybe did a little bit better with their head coaching and kind of GM, but they had to implement a rule where they were interviewing minority candidates because it wasn't happening.
Exactly.
But like, we need to get to a point where, like you talked about it earlier, we're past awareness. Like, we need to start seeing the change. Exactly. And there doesn't need to be rules like the Rooney Rule where we're interviewing minorities. That should just be a given that the best person is picked for the job. Whereas more often than not, we don't see that. We very rarely see that in sports. I mean, you don't see it in hockey, although if you make the argument, very many people are going to expect that. As bad as that sounds, that's just the reality to some.
Reality.
But I mean, if there's ever going to be a black owner, it's got to first come in the NBA or the NFL. And I think that Adam Silver has been like a great leader in representing their sport and understanding that he really needs to engage his players and understand what's going on, because his sport is, you know, a majority of black athletes, and you know, it can lead to big problems if you don't listen. Roger Goodell's kind of now getting it a little bit, maybe, but I mean, he
better than it was before.
Yeah, but again, like, how genuine is it, right? Like, that's always going to be the argument, is how genuine is some of his decision making now? Is it just that he's being pressured because he really fell on the wrong side of this police brutality and protest?
But even if it's a negative, you know, I mean, motivation that's causing positive outcome,
yeah,
you still celebrate it, because, you know, just like, it's like not going, you want to go to the gym, you want to get in shape, right? But get in your car to get there, like, that's the tough part. So sometimes, but you get into the gym, once you get to the gym, you're like, this is not so bad. Like I enjoy it. So, I think psychologically, Roger Goodell, if he keeps doing the right things, he's going to see the positive result, which is going to now make it genuine.
Right.
So some people just have to be pushed in the right direction. And I'm hoping that he continues to be pushed in the right direction.
Well, there's definitely going to be a lot of people holding him accountable, and I think rightfully so. It'll be very interesting with the next, 12 to 18 months for the NFL and the NBA and all of these major sports leagues, really to see it. Once the season finishes, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
Because this is not obviously an issue that is going to go away. This is an issue that needs to continue to be in the mainstream and the spotlight, and changes need to be made. And we're going to hopefully see some of these commissioners and leagues be held accountable more so than they've ever been before.
100%. And if they're in doubt, follow Adam Silver.
That's right. I mean, 100%. He's been
incredible.
He's been whether it was COVID or social justice issues, he's looking to be on the right side of what is going on.
Yeah, he's a human being first.
Yeah. Look no further than Donald Sterling, right? Exactly. What a hell of a way to start your career as a commissioner. Exactly. Listen, Coach, it has been fantastic. It has been great talking to you. I think there's way more that we can cover, and hopefully you'll come back and we could talk a little bit more about this. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to do this.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Julian. It was great. It's finally, it's been a while, as I said to you, that somebody's looked into all the dimensions of my life and try to spend the time and put them all together. So I just appreciate the effort. I have nothing but gratitude for the time and the conversation, and I hope to do it again sometime.
For sure. For Jay Holness, Julian Ortiz, your host of the Big O Podcast, thank you for watching and listening.